Welcome back. As you know, I'm Eli, the computer guy, here for the Daily Blob in a timeline where the President of the United States believes he has a right to determine what the recipe for Coca-Cola really should be. And that in fact is not an Onion article. That is reality. And so one of the things I've been talking about the Trump administration, a lot of people say, Eli, why do you keep talking about Trump? Why do you talk about Honda's new reusable rockets? And it's like, I want to talk about Honda's new reusable rocket. But then Trump comes out and does something that would be much more of an issue in the technology world. I've talked about this before. So Trump, up until this point in time, has talked about putting 100% tariffs on chips. So basically processors, silicon that's coming in from outside the United States would have 100% tariff on them. The idea being is that if companies do a certain amount of manufacturing in the United States, they don't have to pay 100% tariff, but if they don't, then they do. I talked about this being an issue because basically Apple came out, they kowtowed, they blubbered over Trump's ring and stated, haven't done yet, but they've stated that they're going to do so many more hundreds of billions of dollars of investment into the United States, and so therefore they would not have to pay that 100% tariff. One of the things I talked about with this, though, is the problem that you run into is for a lot of startup companies, for a lot of smaller companies, the fact of the matter is even if they put 100% of their overall valuation into investing more into the United States, it still might not be a blip on the map as far as Trump is concerned. And so this is the weird thing we get to with the Trump administration and the idea of America first and supporting the little guy. And then what you really see is just oligarchs, patting each other on the back. So basically, large companies will be able to say they're investing in the United States. They'll be able to drop the tariffs on the silicon. If you are a smaller company, right? If you're creating IoT devices, you're creating whatever kind of digital signage, that type of thing, you happen to be small, all of a sudden you're looking at 100% surcharge on your chips just because, and there's not a whole hell of a lot you can do about it, right? In this modern world, that really does matter. I mean, think about this. You're massively increasing the tax, and that's what it is. You're massively increasing the tax on the hardware products that you're trying to sell. At the exact same time, our economy is in a bit of a kerfuffle, right? Then, I talked about Intel. So Intel at first, Trump said the CEO of Intel had to go because he had conflicts, had to go that day because he had conflicts. And then he met the CEO and then decided, he's a good guy and has a great story. And then I talked about how now the United States wants to buy, do they want to buy equity in Intel or do they just want equity in Intel? I don't actually know the answer to that one. Anyways, at the end of the day, the idea is that the United States government would have equity in Intel. And one of the things that I brought up is that basically if Trump now owns the Intel problem, what will he do to try to help make Intel survive? As we've talked about with Intel, Intel is currently in the death spiral. Right? We've seen it with Yahoo. We saw it with BlackBerry. We've seen it with so many companies. They were the best thing in the world, right? They controlled the universe, masters of the universe for a while, and then they did not one thing stupid. They generally did about 500 things that were stupid, to the point that the ship is sinking. And so one of the things that I brought up before is what happens. So Trump is tying his presidency to a company that seems to already be in the death spiral. Like whatever the CEO does, I don't think it's really going to fix a whole hell of a lot, right? They're not finishing fabs. They were supposed to fab. They're supposed to finish. They're laying off 40,000 people within a 2-year time frame. Like all the things that they're doing do not bode well, right? Their failure with 5G, their failure with graphics cards, their failure with so many things, which again is very weird. And so you have Intel, which is failing, and then for some reason Trump then wants equity in Intel, and therefore Intel is going to be a direct representation on him, right? Is he successful or not? And so the question that I brought up before is, what happens if he starts kneecapping other companies to make Intel more successful, right? Again, in a competitive world, I don't have to be faster than the lion. I just have to be faster than you. I don't have to run fast. I just have to break your kneecap very quickly. And as the mafioso of the United States, do you think fat ass is gonna run? Or do you think fat ass is gonna start breaking knees? And that's where we get to this. It's reported in a lot of places, but here. Trump's plan for 300% semiconductor tariffs weighs on chip stocks, except Intel. Here's why. Really? A 300% tariff weighs on other silicon companies, but Intel actually has a boost in the stock price. I wonder why that could be. A potential deal with the Trump administration is shaping up to be a saving grace for Intel, which saw its shares climb Friday while other semiconductor stocks slid, right? Intel is being supported by the mafioso in chief while the competitors are getting fucking kneecapped. President Trump told a group of reporters aboard Air Force One Friday morning that he could put tariffs on imported chips as soon as next week. Quote, I'll be setting tariffs next week and the week after on steel and I would say chips and semiconductors. We'll be setting sometime next week or the week after, the president said. Quote, I'm going to have a rate that is going to be 200%, 300%, Trump said. The White House didn't immediately respond to a request for comment. So it has gone from 100% to now 200 or 300%. Wow! I'm glad he's dealing with inflation so well. Remember under the Biden administration where inflation was going through the roof and when people complained, Biden said no, that wasn't a problem. And so people voted for Trump because they wanted Trump to deal with inflation. And so now he's coming through and he's taxing the ever-loving crap out of absolutely everything. And that's the thing to be thinking about, like with these chips, is I don't know. Like when you look at a computer, when you look at an IoT device, how much is the chip part of this? Like so this is a Raspberry Pi 5. So it's like an 8 gig, whatever. So this is about $80. So this is about $80. So this is the whole thing. So there's a processor under here. There's a CPU under here. And so what do you think the value of that CPU is compared to this whole thing? Do you think this is a $10 CPU? Right, so if it's a 300% tariff, and this is something to think about, right? So this is an $80 product. If there's a 300% tariff, Jesus Christ, on the processor, and let's say it's $10. $10 seems reasonable, right? It's a quad-core processor with whatever else. That means you're going to be spending $30 in tax just for that particular processor. So this on its own goes from an $80 device thing to a $110 thing. Right? He is putting a $30 tax on this for all the American public. And then the question is, going to when he talks about silicon, right? You take a look at these things, and they've got a lot of chips. This has got a big-ass thing on it. But anyways, I don't know. Here's an Arduino. Right, so this is an Arduino. This isn't quite a computer, but it's got IC chips. Right, so you think about this, and I'm like talking about this, and it's like, okay, well, let's say the CPU is $10, so that's $30 in taxes you're going to pay for this device. Now again, think about that as scale. $30 sucks. $30 times 10 is 300. 30 times 100 is 3,000. That starts getting expensive. But if he's talking about chips, if we take a look at, let's say, this Arduino, right? We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We got big, right? So for 48-year-old eyes, we have 8 large chips on here, plus some smaller ones. Which of these chips gets a 300% tariff? And that's the thing to think about, like with the Arduino. So if you say one chip on the Arduino is, let's say, 10% of the cost of the Arduino, you put that up by 300%, yeah. Well, that gets a 300% tariff. and that gets a 300% tariff, 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 where does the price go there? And that's why this gets to be very concerning, especially with a company like Intel, right? Intel is circling the fucking toilet. Intel has been a disaster for a decade. So not only is the Trump administration going to kneecap the other vendors of processors and computing equipment and that type of thing, they are literally going to be pushing substandard garbage products on the American people. So the exact same time, here in the US, they scream about China pushing Huawei's GPUs. Look at China pushing Huawei's GPUs on the people. That's substandard GPUs. They're pushing these garbage things for AI when they should be purchasing our AI equipment that we don't want to sell them. Anyways, right? That's supposed to be the Chinese model. The Chinese model is a centralized government forcing the people to buy garbage that they don't want to buy. That's the Chinese model, just so we're all clear. And it seems like we're getting that model here. Reports that the Trump administration is considering taking a stake in Intel are giving the stock a boost. Discussions have included tapping the CHIPS Act, of which Trump has been a critic, to partially fund a stake in Intel, according to Bloomberg, citing people familiar with the matter. Deal talks follow on the heels of Intel CEO Lip-Bu Tan's meeting with President Trump on Monday after Trump publicly called for Tan's resignation. So we are going to see where this works out. Think about this, if you're running, you're responsible for IT in your company, right? You're thinking about doing deployments. So at some point, a while ago, you decided on the systems that you use. Maybe they're Lenovo, maybe they're Dell. Is HP still doing servers? I can't figure out what HP is doing half the time. Anyways, right? At some point, you standardized your infrastructure on certain vendors. Maybe it was for a price point, maybe it was for performance, maybe it was for maintenance contracts, right? Just got really good maintenance contracts. But anyways, you standardized. Now think about how Trump is pulling this horse shit right now is basically, depending on what hardware you standardized on 5 years ago, the cost for upgrades and migrations and the rest of it may either go up significantly or not at all. Literally, you know what I'm saying? I don't know, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you standardized on Dell. One company standardized on Dell, another company standardized on Lenovo. Who the fuck cares? They're all running shitty ass Windows anyway. Right? But for some reason, right? Now think about this. The company that standardized on Lenovo might now be at a significant financial disadvantage than the company that standardized on Dell, simply because of the idiocy of how this administration is doing things. Right? Whether you decided to go into full ARM, right? So when you start dealing with these types of things. So these have an ARM processor on them. So ARM processors are generally made by TSMC, a company, a fab like that. For boards this size, you can get Intel processors, x86 or 64 versions of the x86 processors. So depending on what you decided to standardize on for your IoT devices, right, the cost for your IoT devices may either basically stay the same or they may go through the roof, basically based off of the quirks of this particular administration. So it'll be curious to see how this works out at the end of the day. I think this is going to kneecap hard. Like, that's what I don't understand with this administration. Like, what I don't get, they argue this is about bringing manufacturing back to the United States. At the exact same time, they kneecap manufacturing in the United States. Right? If I wanted to bring the manufacturing, right, really the assembly of something like a Raspberry Pi, something along these lines, to the United States, no matter what I do, I'm going to have to import components. We simply just do not manufacture all of the components here. And so by putting all of these tariffs on, right? Again, whether it's the processors, whether it's the aluminum, right? This is aluminum, whether it's all this other stuff, it's literally making manufacturing in the United States more difficult, right? The manufacturing associations in the United States are talking about how many jobs are going to be lost because of this administration. And then the idea is, well, yes, but we're going to get more steel jobs. And it's like a 10 to 1. It's 10 jobs lost for every 1 job gained. So anyways, I don't know. Some things to think about, some things to ponder. What do you think about a 300% increase or 300% tariff on chips? How do you think that is going to go? What do you think about a 300% tariff on chips from companies that don't slobber over the ring? Like, what do you think about this? Apple, one of the most valuable companies in the world, can miraculously get around paying taxes. Isn't that the most fucking hilarious thing in the world? One of the most valuable companies in the world gets around paying a massive amount of taxes. But if you're manufacturing IoT devices in the United States at just even a reasonable scale, maybe you're selling thousands or even tens of thousands of these things per month, which is small, right? Small, but still real, that you are going to get hit with these major taxes. How comfortable does that make you feel about all this idiocy? So anyways, there you go. Put your thoughts down below. If you like these videos, give us a thumbs up. If you hate these videos, give us a thumbs down. Call me amazing. Call me a moron. All that matters is that YouTube interaction. With that, I'll see y'all later.